It's before they're sold out. It's August 12th through 14th of 2016. And hopefully I'll see some of my listeners there, and they can, of course, come up and say hello to me. And, of course, maybe they can say hello to you, Thomas.
There'll be a lot of people there saying hello to everybody. It was the first one was described this way to me. It felt like a family reunion of atheists. That's how several people have described it to me. So
I like it. Well, I know it was great fun. It had a really good energy, and it was real friendly. So I look forward to being there again this summer. So, Thomas, thank you for being on the Phil Ferguson Show, and I appreciate the work you do.
All right. Take care.
Yep.
We'll be around.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Only on Secular Media Network.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. This is Phil Ferguson. And, of course, you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. With me today, as promised, from the big tease earlier in the show, he's finally here. Dan Fincke, how are you?
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a year and a half since we talked about it. I've been looking forward to it.
I know. It was funny. I saw something in my Facebook feed where someone was sharing your work, your blog, Camels with Hammers. Listeners, in case you've never read it, please do. That's kind of one of the points of Dan being here. And I don't even remember what the post was, but I was like, God, I haven't talked to Dan in a while. I should invite him on my show. And I go and I check our old history and messaging. And I was like, oh, shit, we talked about this a year and a half ago. So shame on us for being lame.
I kept thinking, should I get in touch now? I'll give him a little longer.
No. I should only fantasize that you were thinking about me that well.
I did.
You're probably like, Phil who? So I know one of the things that you mentioned you wanted to talk about, of course, other than your amazingly thorough and in-depth and fun and entertaining blog, again, Camels with Hammers, you have classes.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Pretend like I don't know anything about the classes.
Thank you. Well, so I have my PhD in philosophy, and I taught at universities for 11 years and 93 classes at universities and won a teaching award when I was a grad student and everything. So I have a lot of teaching experience. And when I was writing this philosophy blog for atheists and everybody on Camels with Hammers, on Patheos, I had a lot of people who would say to me that my work had inspired them to go and study philosophy, or that they wanted to go take a class, or they wished that I was teaching where they lived. And then one day the light bulb went off. Why don't I teach these people myself? And so I wound up starting my own independent online philosophy classes. And I just meet with people over Google Hangout, and it's like a live video conversation. It's not some thing where you're just, stale reading assignments and someone's grading them and charging you. Instead, it's just live discussion. There's no homework. There's no reading outside of class. We put we'll often put a text on the screen, and we'll read it together. I'll explicate it, give all the context. We'll get into a nice, juicy philosophical argument based on what the students are interested in. And it's just been extraordinary. I've been doing it now. This is my 4th year, and it's my full-time job now. I left academia, and it's perfect for atheists and anyone interested in philosophy, religion, ethics, epistemology, anything. I teach the whole gamut. I'm learning constantly the history of philosophy, metaphysics, love, sex, and gender. Now, and then I'm starting right now an ethics of war class and stoicism class. So anyone who's interested in learning for its own sake, the classes, there's no commitment beyond week to week, and people can quit any time. And I've got year-round students. It's really been extraordinary.
I'm assuming this is something less than $30,000 a year?
Yes, that's too. It's only $40 a week, which if you did it for the whole year would be, which most people don't do, but some people do, would be only $2,000, which is still less than one college class. And that's 2 hours a week intensive in a small group with a professor. I think it's a great deal.
Well, I've never seen your classes. Maybe I'll have to take a couple just myself. I'm kind of a philosophophobe. And I often have this situation where sometimes when college students love to do this, because I do a lot of stuff with the college students, they want to argue with me about whether the table starts with a big T or a little t. What the fuck does that even mean?
I don't know, actually.
I think it's like, big truth versus temporal truth or something, and I'm like, I don't. How about what's it? Do we have free will? What do you think?
I think we have the kind of freedom that matters for morality and for us to have meaningful lives. I don't think our actions are undetermined in that we could have done otherwise in any given action than our brains are going to do. In other words, I think our brains are governed by brain chemistry, which is governed by the laws of physics. However, I also think that when people talk about being unfree, the really important thing to people is, were they not able to do what they would want to do? And in that sense, we're free in the sense that we're governed by our own brains to a large extent, and our own brains are us. And if we don't think of the brain as something different from the mind, because there's no spooky spirit and, there's no spiritual separation between the mind and over there and the brain, which is merely matter. If we understand that we are our brains, then doing what our brains do is being free. So if we're able to follow out our own brains, I think we're free in the sense that matters to me. And I think that doesn't mean I could have just done anything, but I don't think that that's what matters. Now, obviously, we're not free if other people constrain us in ways that restrict us following our own brains. But I think as long as we can follow our own brains and we are our brains, it doesn't matter to me very much that our brains are governed by the laws of physics.
Well, all right. Well, fair enough. Now, how does someone get one of these classes?
They email me at camelswithhammers@gmail.com, or they go to my website, danielfincke.com, Fincke. So,
piece of cake. Well, that's easy. Now, tell me a little bit about the blog. When did you start this?
I started the blog in 2009 on my own, and I wanted to, I'd been doing philosophy and been very academic about things for a long time and was working on Nietzsche. And I was just very inspired by the way that I was getting fired up about a lot of political issues related to atheism. And I would post so much about it on Facebook that I was encouraged to start a blog, and I loved blogs in general. And it just became a wonderful outlet to really apply philosophical kind of critical approaches to things, to these very popular God debates about the existence of God and about ethics after God. And I found that really exciting and fun, and it became an obsession to just make that my primary thing. And instead of worrying about philosophical scholarship, I'm going to still want to get around to that, but it's been fun to just sort of play with ideas freely and to do ethics in a way that's not worrying about how am I going to speak to this arcane discussion going on in the philosophical literature, but how can I just work out my own ideas, and informed, of course, by studying philosophy, but not trying to write for journals, which is a very kind of narrow writing in philosophy that doesn't really have a broad appeal. I'm trying to write in the more classical style of philosophy, which is accessible to people outside philosophy and very relevant to their lives. So I'm writing ethics stuff that to me is very relevant, and I'm writing atheism stuff, which is hopefully, it's helpful to people who are really working through their post-religious thinking. And I really love doing philosophy in a context that's in engagement with a movement and, issues that people are connected to. So that's what that's all about.
All right. Well, I was just scrolling through some recent posts here, and you've got one about John Malkovich.
John
Malkovich and Plato and the cave.
Oh, that's the wrong blog, I think.
No, don't be like that. No, it's you. You talked about it.
Say that? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. You're right.
God, you scared the shit out of me.
I'm sorry. I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
This is him at Meta, right?
John Malkovich and Plato. Yeah, so John Malkovich actually recorded I was just so random, because John Malkovich recorded a reading of Plato's cave allegory, which is one of the most famous things in the history of philosophy.
I actually heard of that one.
What's that?
I have actually heard of that one.
Okay, there you go. And so he recorded it over this sort of arty. I think Yoko Ono is actually part of one of the people who helped compose it. So there's really arty, kind of eerie, creepy background music, and and he's giving a reading of Plato's Cave, and it's absurd and bonkers and funny. So I posted that. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, well, I just read the title, and I'm like, I must listen to that because that's one of the things. Like I said, I don't know much about philosophy, and that's probably a problem for me. But that's one that I know and I enjoyed, and I thought it was very clever and very thought-provoking. And I thought I must listen to that to see what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's great. And it's funny you mention that because my favorite philosophical filmmaker is the guy who wrote Being John Malkovich, Charlie Kaufman, who made Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind, and Synecdoche, and Human Nature, Being John Malkovich, and Adaptation. These are just wonderful movies, and they're very philosophical.
I did quite enjoy Being John Malkovich. What do you have any thoughts on that? Spoilers for the listeners.
That movie, I couldn't even begin to unpack that philosophically. It's just a wonderful notion about the self, right? And what it means to be a self, what it means to be free. I don't know. I'd have to sit down and watch it to give an actual philosophical analysis of it off the top of my head, but I haven't seen it in like 15 years.
I've seen it more recently. I really enjoyed that, and the idea that there's kind of a half floor hidden between floors of a building, and you climb in this hole and you end up becoming John Malkovich.
Yeah.
And what? I was just going to say for the listeners, if you've not seen it, it's a fun show to watch. Really entertaining.
Yeah, and and it works on so many levels. I just don't. It's Eternal Sunshine that I watch the most. That one I've seen about 10, 15 times. We talk about it. But anyway, yeah.
Great. Well, if you can hang on for a minute, we'll take a little commercial break. And then we'll come back and talk some more about the blog and what else you got going, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, please.
All right, listeners, hang on. We'll be back right after this. This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show, we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world.
Here's an excerpt from The Complete Heretic's Guide to Western Religion, The Mormons, by David Fitzgerald.
Although the church does not disclose its finances, it has long been widely recognized as the wealthiest church per capita in America. Time magazine put the church's total assets at a minimum of $30 billion in 1997. In their 1999 book, Mormon America, investigative journalists Richard and Joan K. Osling conservatively estimated church assets at least $25 to $30 billion, adding it was likely well beyond that. The church criticized these numbers as excessive, but without offering any hint of what the real figures might be. The church's financial growth is fueled by sacred taxation, i.e., tithing. To be in good standing, all faithful Mormons must tithe, that is, give 10% of their gross, not net, income to the church. And it's not unheard of for Mormons to pay a double tithe. The Osling's research concluded that as of the mid-1990s, annual tithing revenue was likely between $4.25 and $5.3 billion. That's billion with a B, not an M, annually. The Oslings also found that in addition, the church also owns a surprisingly large amount of lucrative commercial investments, managed mostly through its Deseret Management Corporation. These holdings bring in another estimated $600 million annually. They include an estimated $6 billion or more in stock and bonds, several insurance companies, including